I spent 15 years managing inventory at a warehouse that barely kept the lights on. Every crate sorted, every label printed, every SKU optimized to shave seconds off someone else's bonus. My manager told me anyone could do my job. He said it again the day I noticed the forklift brake line fraying. He ignored the report. 3 hours later, I was pinned under 2 tons of metal and collapsing pallets. My last thought was that nobody would remember my name. Then the pain stopped. My chest filled with cold air that tasted like incense and iron. Light burned through my eyelids. I opened my eyes and saw stone ceiling carved with glowing runes. I was lying in the center of a massive golden circle. Robed priests surrounded me, chanting in a language I shouldn't understand but somehow did. Armored nobles stood at the edges, watching with hungry eyes. One priest raised his staff. The summoning is complete. I tried to sit up, my hands pressed against smooth marble that hummed with magic. The light around me pulsed once, then pulled inward like a collapsing star. The light collapsed inward, and my chest slammed into the marble floor. I gasped and tasted cold stone and something metallic that might have been magic. My ears rang. My hands pressed flat against smooth rock that still hummed with leftover energy from whatever just pulled me through. I pushed myself up to my knees. My arms felt wrong, lighter, weaker. I looked down and saw my hands were the same, but the calluses from 15 years of pallet jacks and barcode scanners were gone. My clothes were different too. Rough brown cloth instead of my torn work uniform. No steel-toed boots, just worn leather that barely fit. The priest who spoke before stepped closer. He held a glowing crystal plate in both hands. He pressed it against my chest before I could move. The plate flared white, then dimmed to a dull gray. Text appeared across its surface in glowing letters I could somehow read. Darren Moss, Otherworlder, Class Laborer, Skill Item Sorting. The room went silent for 3 seconds. Then someone laughed. It started with one noble in silver armor near the back, then another. Then the whole chamber filled with it. The priest pulled the plate away like it burned him. He turned toward the throne at the far end of the hall. Your Majesty, the summoning has failed. This one is not the hero. The king sat forward. He was younger than I expected. Gold crown, bored eyes. He looked at me the way my old manager used to look at damaged freight. F-rank item sorting? That is a farmer's skill, a child's skill. One of the robed mages near the circle stepped forward. He bowed low. The ritual was perfect, Your Majesty. The circle called for a hero of legendary potential. We do not understand how this one answered instead. The king waved one hand like he was swatting a fly. Then send him away. The dungeon storage chambers need laborers. Let him work off the summoning costs there until we find a use for him, or he dies. Either is acceptable. 2 guards in steel plate moved toward me before I could stand. They grabbed my arms and hauled me upright. Legs barely supported my weight. My head still spun from whatever force dragged me across worlds. I tried to speak, but one guard shoved me toward a side door and my breath left in a rush. Move! They marched me out of the chamber and down a corridor carved from black stone. Torches burned in iron brackets every 10 feet. Air smelled like wet rock and old blood. I heard voices echoing from deeper inside, metal scraping stone. Something roaring far below. The guards did not slow down. They pulled me through 3 more halls, down 2 flights of stairs, and past a checkpoint where another guard in lighter armor checked a ledger and waved us through without looking up. We entered a massive central chamber that opened into the earth like a mouth. The ceiling disappeared into darkness. Stone bridges crisscrossed the open space. Adventurers in mismatched armor hauled carts loaded with weapons, monster parts, glowing potions, and things I did not have names for. Everything moved in chaos. No organization, no labeling. Adventurers shouted at clerks behind wooden counters. Clerks shouted back. Coins changed hands. Loot got dumped into unmarked bins. I saw a pile of swords taller than a man just sitting in the corner near a stack of crates leaking something green. One of the guards pointed toward a narrow side passage. Storage sub-level 3. Report to the dungeon quartermaster. Do not leave your assigned area. Do not touch loot marked for appraisal. Do not speak to adventurers unless they address you first. The other guard let go of my arm. Welcome to the bottom, Otherworlder. They turned and left. I stood there alone in the middle of the noise, my heart hammered against my ribs. My hands still shook. I looked down at my chest, where the priest pressed the status plate. The word F-rank burned in my head like a brand I could not scrub off. I took a breath, then another. My warehouse instincts kicked in without permission. I scanned the chamber, noted the bottleneck near the counters, noted the lack of sorting zones, noted the damaged goods mixed with the intact, noted the absence of any inventory tracking system. 15 years of habit did not care that I was in another world. I walked toward the side passage, my legs steadied. The tunnel sloped downward and the noise faded behind me. Torches gave way to glowing moss that barely lit the walls. The air got colder, wetter. I passed two more workers in brown cloth like mine. They did not look at me. One carried a mop, the other pushed a cart full of broken shields. The passage opened into a wide, low-ceilinged room that smelled like rust and rot. Wooden shelves lined every wall. The floor was covered in piles. Cracked swords, shattered armor pieces, clay potion bottles with no labels, monster bones, torn leather, bent shields, glass shards, cloth scraps, metal chunks I could not identify. Everything dumped together with no system, no order, no separation. A man in stained gray robes sat at a desk near the entrance. He did not look up. "You the new summon?" I nodded before I remembered he was not looking. Scratched something on parchment with a quill that looked like it came from a bird I had never seen. "Your job is to clear space. Sort the trash from the salvage. Salvage goes in the left bins. Trash goes in the carts for disposal. Touch nothing valuable. If you find something that glows or hums or feels warm, report it. Not pocket anything. We check." He finally looked up. His eyes were tired. "You will not last a week." He went back to his parchment. I stood there staring at the piles, at the chaos, at the worst organized storage system I had ever seen. My chest tightened. Not from fear, from something else. Something old and angry and sharp. I walked into the room, stepped over a cracked helmet, crouched near the closest pile. My hand reached out without thinking. My fingers touched a piece of rusted metal buried under rotted cloth and monster teeth. The moment my skin made contact, light exploded across my vision. The light exploded across my vision like a flashbang in a dark room. I jerked my hand back, but the glow followed. A translucent blue window snapped open in the air above the rusted metal. Text scrolled across it in sharp white letters. Item, broken short sword fragment. Material, mithril alloy, 87% purity. Origin, Royal Dungeon, floor 14. Condition, corroded. Structural integrity, 12%. Grade, legendary. Separated component, 1 of 7. Appraisal value, 8,200 gold, if restored. I stared at the window. My breath caught in my throat. The words did not fade. They hung there like something carved into reality. I blinked twice. The window stayed. I looked down at my hand. My fingers tingled like I had touched a live wire. Rusted metal sat in the pile exactly where it had been. Nothing about it looked valuable. It looked like trash, like something you would throw away without a second thought. I reached out again. This time, I touched a cracked clay bottle half buried under monster teeth. Another window appeared. Item, lesser healing potion. Expired. Material, spring water base, corrupted. Condition, unsafe for consumption. Grade, common. Trash. Appraisal value, 0 gold. I pulled my hand back. The window vanished. I touched a bent shield. Another window. I touched a piece of torn leather. Another window. Every single item I made contact with triggered the same response. Blue light, white text, material, origin, condition, grade, value. My heart slammed against my ribs. This was not item sorting. This was full appraisal. The kind of skill that took guild appraisers years to train. The kind of skill that adventurers paid gold to access. And the system screen back in the throne room labeled it F rank. I stood up too fast and my head spun. I pressed one hand against the nearest shelf to steady myself. Wood was old and damp. My fingers brushed a stack of metal scraps piled on top. 6 windows opened at once. Item, broken short sword fragment. Grade, legendary. Separated component, 2 of 7. Item, broken short sword fragment. Grade, legendary. Separated component, 3 of 7. Item, broken short sword fragment. Grade, legendary. Separated component, 5 of 7. My breath stopped. I looked at the pile, then at the first piece of rusted metal on the floor, then back at the shelf. My warehouse brain kicked in without permission. 7 components. I had found 4 in one spot, 1 on the floor. That left 2 more. I turned and scanned the room, not with my eyes, with 15 years of inventory logic. Separated shipments always got mixed into adjacent zones. I moved toward the next shelf, pulled aside a stack of broken helmets, found a piece of curved metal wedged between 2 crates. Item, broken short sword fragment. Grade, legendary. Separated component, 6 of 7. I searched for 3 more minutes, found the last piece buried under a pile of rotted cloth near the back wall. I carried all 7 fragments to the cleanest section of floor I could find, laid them out in a line. The moment the 7th piece touched stone, all 7 windows flared bright gold. New text appeared. Component set complete. Reconstruction available. Legendary grade weapon detected. Estimated market value, 50,000 gold. 50,000 gold, the number burned into my vision. I had no idea what that meant in this world, but the way the system highlighted it told me everything I needed to know. I knelt down and stared at the 7 pieces of rusted scrap. My hands shook. Not from fear, from something sharper, something I had not felt in 15 years. This was not trash. This was a system nobody understood, a supply chain everyone ignored, a foundation made of dismissed details. I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. The quartermaster stood in the doorway. He looked at me, then at the 7 fragments laid out on the floor. His face did not change. You are supposed to be clearing space, not playing with scrap metal. I opened my mouth to explain, to show him the windows. But when I looked up, the blue screens were gone. I glanced back at the fragments. The glow had vanished. They looked like rust again, like garbage. The quartermaster walked closer. He stopped 3 feet away and stared down at the pieces. What are you doing? I touched the center fragment. The window snapped back open. Gold text. Legendary grade. 50,000 gold. I looked up at him. Can you see this? He frowned. See what? The window hovered between us, bright enough to light his face, but his eyes did not track it. He was looking at me, not at the screen. I pulled my hand back. The window disappeared. The quartermaster's frown deepened. If you are wasting time, I will report it. Get back to work. He turned and walked back toward his desk. I stayed on the floor. My pulse hammered in my ears. He could not see it. The system labeled my skill F rank. The world thought it was trash. But whatever this ability actually was, it was mine alone. I looked back at the fragments. My mind raced. 50,000 gold for something everyone walked past. For something buried in a pile labeled disposal. I thought about the throne room, the nobles laughing, the king calling me a mistake, the priest pulling the status plate away like it was contaminated. I thought about my manager, about 15 years of optimized inventory nobody noticed until it broke, about dying under a collapsed pallet because someone ignored a report. I picked up the first fragment, then the second. I started stacking them carefully in the corner behind a crate where the quartermaster would not see. My hands moved on instinct, sorting, organizing, categorizing, the same motions I had done 10,000 times in another world. Except this time, the system was broken, and I was the only one who could see it. I touched another pile. More windows opened. Most were trash. But 3 items glowed gold. One was a cracked monster core marked rare. One was a bent dagger marked epic. One was a cloth pouch that looked empty, but the window labeled it spatial storage tier 3. I separated them, hid them, kept sorting. My heart would not slow down. The room was still filthy, still chaotic, still full of garbage nobody wanted. But under the rust and rot, I could see something nobody else could. I could see value. I worked for 2 hours. The quartermaster did not check on me again. By the time I stopped, I had identified 16 items worth more than 1,000 gold each. All of them labeled trash. All of them ignored. I sat down on the floor and leaned against the wall. My arms ached. My fingers were covered in dust and something sticky I did not want to identify. But my chest felt lighter than it had in years. Then I saw it. A second window. Smaller, tucked in the corner of my vision like a notification I had missed. I focused on it, and the text expanded. System notice. Unregistered skill evolution detected. Classification error logged. Skill rank under review. The window flickered once. Then it vanished. I tried to call it back. Focused. Concentrated. Nothing appeared. I touched the fragment pile again. The normal appraisal window opened. But the second notification was gone. I stared at the empty air where it had been. My skin prickled. Skill rank under review. That meant someone was watching. That meant the system knew something was wrong. I did not know if that was good or bad. I did not know what unregistered meant. I did not know what would happen if the rank changed. But I knew one thing. The world thought I was a mistake. The system labeled me F rank, and somewhere in the code, something had just noticed that did not add up. I stood up, wiped my hands on my rough brown pants, looked at the pile of legendary fragments hidden behind the crate. Then at the 16 other items I had separated and cataloged in my head. My old manager used to say anyone could do my job. That I was replaceable. That my work did not matter. I smiled for the first time since the forklift crushed my chest. Maybe he was right. Maybe anyone could have done that job. But nobody else could do this one. I spent the rest of that day sorting. Not because the quartermaster told me to, because my hands would not stop moving. 15 years of muscle memory do not care that you died and woke up in another world. They just go. I separated the piles into categories. Metal scraps in one corner, monster parts in another, broken armor against the left wall, cracked potions near the door where the air moved, clay, glass, leather, bone, cloth. Everything got a zone. Everything got a system. The quartermaster walked past twice and said nothing. He probably thought I was just cleaning faster than expected. But every time I touched something, the blue windows opened. Most items were trash. Real trash. Corroded beyond repair. No value. No potential. I marked those mentally and moved them toward the disposal cart. But every 10th item glowed a different color. Green for uncommon, blue for rare, purple for epic, gold for legendary. I hid those behind crates or under cloth where nobody would see. By the time the shift bell rang, I had identified 23 valuable items buried in garbage. My arms ached. My back screamed. My fingers were numb. I had not eaten since I arrived. I did not care. The next morning, I returned to the storage room before the quartermaster arrived. I needed to test something. I pulled the 7 sword fragments out from behind the crate and laid them on the floor again. The system window appeared. Component set complete. Reconstruction available. I stared at the text. Reconstruction available. That meant the system could do more than just identify. It could guide. I focused on the words and a new prompt appeared. Initiate reconstruction? Warning, requires basic smithing knowledge. I did not have smithing knowledge. I had inventory logic. But inventory logic said separated components only worked when aligned correctly. I picked up the first fragment, rotated it slowly. The system window highlighted one edge in gold. I picked up the second fragment. Another edge glowed. I pressed them together. The metal hummed. Heat flared under my palms. The 2 pieces fused with a sound like grinding glass. The rust flaked away. Underneath, the metal was silver blue and flawless. I did not stop. I grabbed the 3rd piece. The 4th. The system guided every connection, highlighted every contact point. My hands shook from the heat, but I kept going. 7 minutes later, I held a complete short sword. The blade was 30 inches long, perfectly balanced. The edge caught the torchlight and reflected it like a mirror. New window appeared. Item Storm Warden Blade. Grade Legendary. Material Mithril Alloy. 98% purity. Appraisal value 52,000 gold. 1,000 gold. The number burned into my vision. I had no idea what I could buy with that. But I knew what it meant. It meant I was holding more money than the king spent to summon me. Footsteps echoed in the tunnel. I shoved the sword under a pile of cloth and stood up. Tobias the janitor walked in pushing his cart. He was older than me, maybe 50, thin, tired eyes. He glanced at me and kept walking toward the mop bucket in the corner. You are the new summon. I nodded. Yeah. He filled his bucket from a barrel near the back wall. Quartermaster says you work fast. That is stupid. Work slow. Stay quiet. Do not get noticed. He left before I could respond. I waited until his footsteps faded. Then I pulled the sword back out, my heart hammered. I needed to move it. Hiding it here was too risky. But I had no access to the upper levels. No merchant contacts. No idea how to sell something this valuable without getting robbed or reported. I wrapped the blade in cloth and tucked it under my shirt. The metal pressed cold against my ribs. I walked out of the storage room and into the main dungeon hub. The chaos was worse than yesterday. Adventurers shouted. Clerks slammed ledgers. Coins spilled across counters. I kept my head down and moved toward the side exit. A hand grabbed my shoulder. I turned. A man in dark leather armor stood behind me. No guild markings, no rank insignia. His eyes flicked toward my chest, where the sword pressed against cloth. You looking to sell something? I froze. He smiled. Relax. I buy things the guild does not want to log. Fair prices? No questions. I should have walked away. I should have said no. But 52,000 gold was sitting against my ribs, and I had been in this world for 2 days with no money and no plan. How much for a legendary grade sword? His smile widened. Depends on the sword. I pulled the cloth back just enough for him to see the blade. His expression did not change, but his pupils dilated. 30,000 gold. Right now. The system window said, countered, 45. He laughed. 35. Final offer. You try to sell that through official channels and the guild takes half. Then they ask where you got it. Then you disappear. I thought about the throne room. The king calling me a mistake. The nobles laughing. I thought about the quartermaster saying I would not last a week. Deal. The merchant pulled a small leather pouch from his belt. He opened it, and the inside glowed faintly. Spatial storage. He reached in and pulled out a stack of gold coins that should not have fit. He counted them onto a crate. 35 stacks. 1,000 gold each. The sword. I handed it over. He wrapped it carefully and tucked it into the pouch. The whole transaction took less than 2 minutes. He walked away without another word. I stared at the gold. My hands trembled. I had just sold reassembled trash for more money than I earned in a year at the warehouse. I loaded the coins into a sack I borrowed from the disposal cart. The weight almost pulled my arm out of socket. I dragged it back toward the storage room. My chest felt tight. Not from fear, from something sharper. Something that tasted like victory. Tobias was waiting inside. He stood near the door with his mop in one hand. His eyes locked onto the sack. What did you do? I dropped the sack near the crate. My job. His face went pale. If the quartermaster sees that, you are dead. If Lord Valen hears you sold dungeon loot without guild clearance, you are worse than dead. I looked at him. He was shaking, but he had not run. He had not reported me. He was just standing there holding a mop like it was a weapon. You going to tell them? He stared at me for 5 long seconds. Then he laughed. It sounded broken. No, I have been cleaning dungeon floors for 3 years. Nobody notices me either. He set the mop down and walked closer. What else can you find in this trash? I smiled. Everything. We worked together for the next 4 days. I sorted. He hauled. I identified. He hid. My skill revealed that 30% of the disposal pile was misappraised loot. Rare monster cores labeled as common. Epic daggers marked as scrap. Cursed rings that could be cleansed with basic purification magic. I separated everything. Cataloged it in my head using the same SKU system I used at the warehouse. Tobias knew a second black market merchant, then a third. We sold 12 items in 6 days. Total take 68,000 gold. We split it 60-40. My share sat in a spatial pouch Tobias bought for me with his first cut, but my body started breaking. Every time I used the appraisal skill for more than an hour, my head throbbed. My vision blurred at the edges. My hands shook so hard I had to sit down. The system never warned me. Never showed a cooldown timer, it just drained me. On the 7th day, I touched a cracked monster core and my nose started bleeding. The blood hit the floor in thick drops. Tobias saw and dragged me toward the water barrel. You need to stop. I wiped my face. I am fine. You are bleeding from your brain. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking again. The blue windows flickered at the edges of my vision, even when I was not touching anything. I blinked hard. The flicker stopped. I ignored him and went back to sorting. That afternoon, I found something that made my chest tighten. A small black gemstone buried under a pile of rotted cloth. The moment I touched it, the system window